AITA for invoking a hidden clause after my wife tried to take over my family company. I'm Reed, 38, and after 8 years of marriage to Lila, I had gotten dangerously good at explaining away things that should have bothered me. I knew how she liked her coffee, which wine she ordered when she wanted to look calm, and the exact tone she used when she was about to turn a conversation into a performance. I knew she pressed her tongue against the inside of her cheek when she was angry but didn't want anyone else to see it. I knew she reorganized the kitchen drawers whenever she felt powerless. I knew that when she said, "Let's be practical," she had usually already made a decision and was waiting for me to agree with it. For years, I told myself that was just marriage under pressure. By our 8th anniversary, I finally understood that patience can look a lot like permission to the wrong person. Lila had not always treated me like an obstacle. When we met, she was confident in a way I found almost magnetic. She could walk into a room full of people who had already decided what they thought of her and leave with half of them asking for her opinion. She did not apologize for taking up space. I had grown up around people who could turn a family dinner into a shareholder meeting without changing their tone, so I admired that she never seemed intimidated by my relatives. After my father died, the company he founded became the center of almost every family disagreement. He had built it over decades, and even after his health began failing, everyone still looked to his empty chair before making a decision. I inherited a controlling interest through a family trust, while my sister, Celeste, held a smaller share and served as a successor trustee with me. There were also several independent board members, including Iris, who had known my father for years and had no patience for emotional theatrics. I was grieving and trying not to let the company split the family apart. Lila stood beside me through all of it. At one of the first meetings after the funeral, an older relative talked over me 3 times in 10 minutes. Lila waited until we were in the car before saying, "Your family talks like you're still waiting for permission to be in the room." I stared through the windshield. "They're adjusting," I said. "No," she replied. "You're making excuses for them because confrontation makes you feel disloyal." It stung because it was true. She helped me prepare for difficult conversations. She reminded me that being respectful did not require being silent. When I doubted myself, she said, "Your father trusted you. Stop acting like everyone else gets a vote on whether he was right." That was the version of Lila I loved. She made me feel stronger without making me feel small. When she began attending occasional company dinners and strategy discussions, it felt natural. She remembered people's names, understood the tension in the room, and could summarize a messy conversation in 2 sentences. I defended her when Celeste said she was moving too quickly into family business. "She's helping me," I told my sister. Celeste looked at me across our father's old dining table. "Helping you do what?" "Handle things." That wasn't my question. I got angry. Not loud, but cold. I accused Celeste of resenting Lila because she was not born into the family. Celeste told me I was confusing caution with hostility. We did not speak for almost 2 weeks. Lila was gentle about it. "I don't want to come between you and your sister," she said while setting a mug beside me one morning. Then, after a pause, she added, "But she does need to accept that you're not a child she can manage." At the time, I heard concern. Looking back, I hear positioning. The first changes were small enough to dismiss. Lila started answering questions directed at me. She would do it smoothly, almost helpfully. "Rita's been thinking about that," she would say before I opened my mouth. Or, "He doesn't need to get buried in the emotional side of this." If I corrected her, she laughed lightly and touched my arm as if we were a couple with an inside joke. "Sorry," she would say. "I know how much you hate being put on the spot." I did hate being put on the spot. That was what made it difficult to object. She used true things about me as permission to speak for me. Eventually, she began describing my caution as weakness. When I wanted more time to review a contract, I was too sentimental about how your father used to do things. When I asked for more detail in a restructuring proposal, I was avoiding hard decisions. When I disagreed with her in private, she said I was reacting defensively because I had grown up surrounded by people who protected me. The criticism never came all at once. It arrived in reasonable-sounding pieces. Then Drew entered the picture. Drew was Lila's younger brother, 33, friendly in the way some people are when they want the conversation to move past details. He remembered birthdays, laughed easily, and called everyone man when he wanted them to relax. He had bounced through several business ventures, none of which lasted long enough for anyone to ask too many questions. Lila first suggested giving him a short service contract to help with vendor coordination during a busy quarter. "It's temporary," she said. "He knows the systems those contractors use." I asked for a scope of work. She stared at me as if I had insulted her family. "You trust strangers with invoices, but my brother has to audition forever?" "That isn't what I said. It's what you're doing." We argued for 20 minutes. I eventually agreed to a limited contract, subject to normal review. I told myself it was not worth damaging my marriage over something so small. The contract was vague, but the amount was modest. 3 months later, Drew had a second contract, then a third. By the time I started paying serious attention, he was being introduced in emails as operations support, even though the board had never approved a formal role for him. I brought it up with Lila one night while she was slicing lemons at the kitchen counter. "Why is Drew being copied on internal scheduling?" "He's helping." "With what?" "Things that fall between departments." "That's not an answer." She put the knife down carefully. "Do you hear yourself?" "Yes." "No, you hear your father." Every question sounds like an audit. It is an audit when company access is involved. Her face changed for half a second. Then she picked up the knife again. "Fine, I'll tell him to stop helping." The next morning, she was cheerful. Too cheerful. She made coffee, kissed my cheek, and asked whether I wanted dinner at home that night. I apologized before breakfast was over. That became our pattern. I raised a concern. She made the concern sound like an attack. I apologized for the tone, and the original issue disappeared. Celeste noticed long before I admitted anything. At a family lunch, Lila interrupted me while I was explaining why a proposed equipment sale needed another valuation. "Reed gets attached to assets because they remind him of his dad," she said, smiling at the table. "It's sweet, but not always useful." No one laughed. Celeste set down her fork. "He was talking," she said. Lila's smile stayed in place. "I know. I was clarifying. He didn't ask you to." I stepped in before it became a fight. "It's fine." Celeste looked at me, not Lila. "That's the problem. Everything is fine until it isn't." On the drive home, Lila said my sister had embarrassed her. "She defended me," I said. "From your wife." "From being interrupted." Lila turned toward the passenger window and did not speak for the rest of the drive. That night, she slept in the guest room. By morning, I was the one apologizing again. The warning signs became harder to ignore about 6 weeks before our anniversary. The first was an insurance email forwarded to me by mistake. It referenced expanded system access for Drew and asked whether his status should be classified as a contractor or temporary officer. I replied that he was neither an officer nor approved for expanded access. The sender called me within 5 minutes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was told the authorization came through your office." "Who told you that?" There was a pause. "Lila's office." Lila did not have an office at the company. She had a board advisory role and a limited voting proxy I had granted her 2 years earlier, but she was not an executive employee. The proxy existed because I had undergone a medical procedure and wanted operational continuity if I was unavailable. It covered a defined block of my personal voting units, not the family trust assets, and it came with strict conditions. At least, that was how Theo, our family attorney, had explained it when I signed. At the time, Lila called it a practical safeguard between spouses. I sent her a message. "Why is insurance being told Drew has expanded system access?" She replied 20 minutes later. "Minor paperwork issue. Already handled." I called her. She did not answer. That afternoon, a board calendar invitation appeared in my inbox. The subject line was Special Session, Leadership Transition. Before I could open the attachment, the invitation disappeared. I assumed someone had recalled it, but the phrase stayed with me. Leadership Transition. When I asked Lila whether a special meeting had been scheduled, she didn't even look up from her phone. Just housekeeping. Why did the invitation say Leadership Transition? The agenda template was reused. Who is transitioning? She sighed. This is exactly why people hesitate to include you early. You see one phrase and turn it into a crisis. I wanted to believe her. I also wanted to see the agenda. She promised to send it later. She never did. 2 days after that, I found a password reset notice for our joint household account. It was not the company's money, but it covered several automatic payments and a shared emergency reserve. When I tried to sign in, my password no longer worked. Lila said the bank had required an update. Then why didn't you tell me? I thought I did. You didn't. Read. I cannot document every sentence I say to you. The new password arrived by text 10 minutes later. I logged in and saw no missing money. I let it go. That same week, an employee I had known for years called me directly. Hey, he said, keeping his voice low. Are you actually stepping back, or is that just what Lila wants us to think? I sat up straighter. What did she say? Nothing official. Drew's been telling people there'll be a cleaner chain of command after the next board meeting. Drew said that. Yeah, I figured maybe you knew. I thanked him and told him not to speculate at work. Then I sat in my car for almost half an hour, staring at the dashboard. I did not confront Lila that night. That decision probably saved the company. Instead, I began checking records I was already authorized to review. Drew's latest invoice was almost 3 times higher than his first one. The description said strategic operational support, followed by a total number of hours and no meaningful deliverables. I compared his invoices to calendar entries. Several dates did not line up. On one day, he claimed 10 hours of on-site work. He had posted photographs from a golf course several hundred miles away. I did not screenshot the social media post or build a case around it. I simply noted that the invoice needed verification. The more important discovery came from a saved voicemail. Lila had called me during a meeting and apparently thought she had disconnected before calling Drew. My phone captured the first part of her next message because of a carrier glitch that sometimes attached audio when calls transferred. Most of it was muffled. One sentence was clear. Don't push him too hard until the vote is scheduled. I listened to it in my car. Then I listened again. The file showed the date and time. It was 2 days before the disappearing board invitation. My first instinct was to go home and demand an explanation. My second was to call Celeste. She answered on the 4th ring. Are you okay? She asked. I need you to tell me I'm overreacting. That depends. I played the voicemail through the car speakers. There was a long silence. Where are you? She asked. In the parking garage. Stay there. Celeste. I'm serious. Don't go home angry. I'm coming to you. She arrived 30 minutes later carrying a canvas document case I recognized from our father's study. When she got into the passenger seat, she did not say hello. You keep calling it peace, she said, because admitting its fear would hurt too much. I'm not afraid of Lila. No, you're afraid that if you look directly at what she's doing, you'll have to admit your marriage is not what you defended. I gripped the steering wheel. That isn't fair. I'm not trying to be fair. I'm trying to stop you from helping her bury you. She opened the case and removed a copy of the company's operating agreement, the version executed after my father's final restructuring. I had seen it before. I had signed it. But like a lot of people who inherit responsibility along with grief, I had relied on summaries and attorneys to tell me what mattered. Celeste had kept copies of everything. I took these after Dad died, she said. You were letting Lila organize his office, and she kept asking which documents controlled voting rights. You never told me that. You were barely sleeping. Every time I questioned her, you accused me of attacking your marriage. That was true. Tucked inside the agreement was a handwritten note in my father's blocky handwriting. Marriage should never become a back door into ownership. I read it twice. Celeste watched my face. I hated that note when I found it, she said. It sounded paranoid. Now I think he knew exactly how people behave when love and control get mixed together. We called Theo. Theo was 59 and had worked with my father for most of his career. He spoke about legal documents the way a surgeon speaks about anatomy, without drama, without comfort, and with no patience for people who wanted the facts to be softer than they were. He met us that evening in a small conference room at his office. After reviewing the agreement, my proxy documents, and the voicemail, he took off his glasses. The agreement does not punish divorce, he said. It restricts undisclosed conflicts and unauthorized transfer attempts. What does that mean for Lila's proxy? I asked. It means her authority is conditional. She can vote the specified units only while acting in good faith for the benefit of the company and the granting member. Intentional adverse action against the grantor, if documented, suspends that authority pending board and trustee review. Celeste leaned forward. Her announcing that she's trying to remove him would count. Possibly. Context matters. An honest governance disagreement is not intentional harm. A coordinated attempt to disable his access, conceal related party transactions, or transfer protected assets for personal compensation would be different. I looked at Theo. What about the family trust assets? They cannot be transferred by ordinary board majority. The operating agreement requires trustee approval and a supermajority that includes at least one independent director. Your father was not romantic about ownership documents. That was the closest Theo came to making a joke. He turned several pages. Related party contracts require disclosure to the independent members. If Drew received material payments through arrangements influenced by his sister, those payments should have been disclosed and approved. They weren't, I said. Then collect the records you are legally entitled to review. Do not access accounts outside your authority. Do not remove originals. Do not confront anyone until we understand the full picture. Celeste glanced at me. Theo noticed. I mean that, he said. No threats. No late-night accusations. No changing company systems on your own. Let the documents establish the sequence. For the next 2 weeks, I lived inside a version of my marriage that looked normal from across the room. Lila discussed anniversary dinner plans. She asked whether I preferred the private room or the main dining area. She ordered new place cards because she did not like the first font. She complained that the florist had used the wrong shade of cream. At night, she slept beside me. During the day, I reviewed records with Theo and Celeste. The original board packet listed a discussion about operational efficiency and vendor consolidation. The revised packet, which Iris later admitted she had received only 48 hours before the meeting, added a leadership vote and an authorization to explore an asset transfer. The packet sent to me did not include either item. Lila had also texted me. Tomorrow's meeting is minor housekeeping. No need to rearrange your schedule. I saved the message. The access log showed that Drew's credentials had been created before any request for board approval. His access had been sponsored through an administrative process using Lila's limited authority, but the form described him as temporary operations support. No signed appointment existed. The bank records showed escalating consulting payments to Drew. Each payment was just below the threshold that would automatically trigger a secondary approval under the company's internal controls. That pattern was too consistent to be accidental. Then I found Dorian. Dorian was an outside buyer who had approached the company before about purchasing a package of non-core assets. We had declined his earlier proposal because the price was low and the assets were more valuable together than separated. A draft agreement in the deal archive showed that negotiations had resumed. My name was nowhere in the email chain. Lila had exchanged messages with Dorian using language that suggested she expected to have authority after the upcoming vote. Drew was copied on several logistical discussions. The draft sale price was still low. At first, I assumed Lila believed the quick sale would make her look decisive. Then Theo directed my attention to an appendix near the end. Success compensation, payable upon closing. The recipients were identified through 2 consulting entities. One belonged to Drew. The other was controlled by Lila. The amount was large enough to change the entire meaning of the deal. I sat back from the table. Celeste read the line, then read it again. Theo said nothing. That was the moment I stopped thinking of it as my marriage falling apart. I said, "This is a breach." Theo nodded once. Potentially several. Celeste's anger was immediate. She was going to use your proxy to sell family assets and pay herself? She could not transfer the trust assets without us, Theo said. But she may have believed the board authorization would create enough momentum to pressure the trustees or support a later claim that Reed was obstructing a valid transaction. So she was building a story, I said. Yes. The story was simple. Lila was the competent spouse trying to save a company from an emotional heir. Drew was temporary support. I was unstable, absent, and resistant to necessary change. Once I reacted badly to the divorce, she could point to my behavior as proof. I thought about every time she had told me people hesitated to include me because I overreacted. Every time she had answered for me in public. Every time she had described my questions as emotional. She had not invented that narrative overnight. She had been rehearsing it for years. Theo closed the draft. "What is the anniversary dinner guest list?" he asked. The question seemed unrelated. "Family," I said. Some senior company people. Iris. A few longtime friends. Why is Iris attending? Lila invited her. She said Dad always included board members in major family celebrations. Celeste's expression changed. She wants witnesses, she said. Theo looked at me. Likely. She may intend to announce the separation and frame the board meeting before you can respond. My stomach tightened. What do I do? Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. Attend the dinner. If she raises company governance, ask clear questions. Do not accuse her of crimes. Do not reveal all the evidence. If she makes material statements in front of witnesses, remember the wording. Celeste stared at him. You want Reed to let her humiliate him? I want Reed to avoid warning her before the board receives notice. I hated the plan. Not because it was weak, because it required me to sit still while my wife used our marriage as a weapon in front of people who had known me since I was a child. Theo seemed to read that on my face. You can confront her privately tonight, he said. She may deny everything, delete what she can, contact Dorian, alter her story, and accelerate the vote. Or you can let her proceed under the belief that you remain uninformed. I looked at Celeste. She did not tell me what to do. That mattered. I decided to wait. Our anniversary dinner was held in a private dining room with long windows and a table set for 22 people. Lila had arranged white place cards beside low candles. A bottle of her favorite red wine sat breathing near her seat. She wore the dark green dress I had once told her made her look fearless. I wore the suit she had selected for me. For the first 40 minutes, she performed a normal anniversary. She touched my shoulder when people arrived. She laughed at stories about our wedding. She thanked my aunt for bringing photographs. Drew sat 3 seats away, wearing a sympathetic expression that did not reach his eyes. Celeste barely spoke. Iris was seated near the middle of the table. She seemed uncomfortable with the intimacy of the gathering, but Lila kept drawing her into company-adjacent conversation. Dessert arrived. Mine was a slice of chocolate cake I never touched. Lila tapped a spoon against her wine glass. The room quieted. She stood. For 8 years, she began, I have tried to build a life based on partnership, honesty, and shared responsibility. I felt my wedding ring pressing into the side of my finger. Lila continued in the same controlled voice she used when she wanted an audience to think she was being brave. I had hoped tonight could be a celebration. Instead, I think the honest thing is to acknowledge that our marriage has reached its end. Someone inhaled sharply near the far end of the table. My aunt looked down at her plate. Lila turned toward me. I filed for divorce this afternoon. The room became so quiet I could hear the soft hum of the ventilation system. She kept going. Because the personal situation has already begun affecting the company, temporary safeguards have been put in place. Reed's access has been suspended pending review, and the board will meet tomorrow morning to vote on a leadership transition. Iris's head lifted. That detail had apparently not been presented to her as a public announcement. I looked at Lila. Are you saying this as my wife? I asked, or as someone trying to take my family's company? Her eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second. Then she smiled. Both, if that's what it takes. Theo had told me to remember the wording. I did not need to try. Drew leaned forward. Reed, man, maybe tonight isn't the time. I turned to him. You seem very informed for a contractor. His face tightened. Lila lifted her glass again. I did not want to make this ugly, she said. But I refuse to spend another year carrying a marriage and a company while Reed hides behind his father's name. That was when she delivered the line she had probably practiced. You were just the last name I had to tolerate to get what I earned. I looked around the table. Several relatives were staring at their hands. One senior employee looked furious but uncertain whether he was allowed to show it. Celeste watched me without moving. Iris had stopped drinking her wine. Lila expected me to explode. I could see it in the way she held herself, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, every angle prepared for my reaction. So I smiled. Not because I was amused. Because she had just done more for my legal position in 30 seconds than I could have forced out of her in a month. I raised my glass. Thank you for making your position clear, I said. The confidence on her face flickered. That's all you have to say? For tonight. She stared at me. I set down the glass. Then she told me I should leave the house until temporary arrangements were made. I left a key on the kitchen counter, she said. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I did not argue about the house in front of everyone. I did not tell her she could not order me out. I did not ask whether she had already packed my clothes. I stood, thanked the guests for coming, and looked at Iris. I assume I'll receive the complete board packet before tomorrow's meeting. Lila answered for her. You no longer have access. Iris's expression hardened. That is not what he asked. For the first time that night, Lila looked uncertain. I left before she recovered. In the parking lot, Celeste caught up with me. You knew, she said. Some of it. How much? Enough to know tomorrow matters more than tonight. She looked back toward the restaurant. I could go in there and ruin her life with one sentence. I know. Do you want me to? No. Celeste exhaled through her nose. That was not easy for me to offer. Despite everything, I almost laughed. Theo called as soon as I reached my car. Exact words, he asked. I repeated them. He was quiet for several seconds. Do not go to the house alone tonight, he said. Do not confront her. We will serve notice to the board before the meeting begins. I need clothes. Celeste can accompany you, or you can buy a shirt. I'm not buying a new shirt for my own removal meeting. Then take Celeste. The house was dark when we arrived. My key still worked. On the kitchen counter sat a single brass key beside a note in Lila's handwriting. Please respect the space I need. Celeste read it over my shoulder. She publicly detonates your marriage and asks you to respect her space. I'm not taking the bait. We went upstairs. Some of my clothes had been placed in garment bags on the bed. My personal laptop was gone from the desk, but it belonged to the company and had apparently been collected through the access suspension. Theo had already told me not to interfere with company equipment. I packed enough for several days. In the closet, I found an empty document sleeve where our household financial records had been kept. I photographed the empty shelf and called my divorce attorney, whom Theo had recommended that afternoon. She told me not to move money except for ordinary personal needs and not to cancel shared obligations without legal guidance. She would file for temporary financial restraints in the morning. I changed passwords on my personal email, cloud storage, phone account, and individual bank access. I did not touch Lila's accounts. I saved copies of documents already provided to me through authorized channels. Theo's team preserved the voicemail metadata, email trail, and packet versions. By 2 in the morning, sealed envelopes had been prepared for every voting board member. Each contained Theo's letter, the relevant operating agreement sections, the original and altered agendas, the share ledger, Drew's access trail, a payment summary, the Dorian draft, and the compensation appendix. I slept for less than 2 hours on Celeste's couch. At 7, she handed me coffee. You look terrible, she said. Thank you. Dad would have worn the blue tie. Dad thought every important tie was blue. He was usually right. I wore the blue tie. The board meeting began at 9. The conference room had no windows. The overhead lights gave everyone the same exhausted complexion, and the air conditioning made a faint clicking sound every few minutes. Lila was already there when I arrived. She wore a cream jacket and had her hair pulled back. She looked rested, polished, and completely in control. Drew sat near the end of the table with a temporary badge clipped to his belt. Dorian stood beside the coffee station speaking quietly with another board member. When Lila saw me, she stopped mid-sentence. You shouldn't be here, she said. I placed my hand on the back of an empty chair. If this meeting is about removing me, I think I'll stay for the part where you explain why you changed the packet. Iris looked from me to Lila. What does he mean? Lila recovered quickly. Reed is emotional right now. I refuse to let his private resentment derail the responsible choice. I'm not asking anyone to take my side because my marriage is ending, I said. I'm asking this board to read what was removed. Theo entered behind me with another attorney from his office. Lila's face went pale, then hard. This is a closed meeting. Theo set a letter in front of Iris. I am counsel to the family trust and have been asked to advise the board regarding authority over the proposed actions. Dorian moved away from the coffee station. Drew leaned toward Lila and whispered something. Iris opened Theo's letter. No one spoke while she read the first page. Then she looked at Lila. Did you circulate a different packet to read? Lila folded her hands on the table. The materials were tailored based on attendance and voting relevance. That is not an answer, I opened one of the sealed envelopes and slid the contents toward Iris. The first packet is the version circulated to the independent directors, I said. The second is what was sent to me. The leadership vote and asset transfer discussion were removed from mine. Lila shook her head. Because his access was under review. Who authorized the review? Iris asked. The executive committee. There has been no executive committee vote. It was an administrative safeguard. Iris looked at the other independent member. He shook his head. Theo spoke. The agreement permits temporary access restrictions for verified security events. It does not permit a spouse holding conditional proxy authority to disable the granting member in preparation for a vote against him. Lila turned toward me. This is exactly what he does. He hides behind attorneys whenever someone challenges him. Theo did not react. The agreement does not punish challenge, he said. It restricts undisclosed conflicts and unauthorized transfer attempts. He directed the board to the highlighted sections. Lila's limited proxy covered only a defined number of my personal units. It did not cover the family trust's controlling interest. The proxy was also conditional on good faith conduct and automatically suspended pending review if the holder intentionally acted against the grantor while concealing a material conflict. The share ledger made the math clear. Even before considering the suspension, Lila did not have the votes she had implied she controlled. She had counted unvested units and treated trust-held shares as if they could be directed through an ordinary board majority. Dorian cleared his throat. I negotiated with the authority presented to me, he said. I'm not interested in becoming part of a family dispute. This is not a family dispute, Iris said. It is a disclosure issue. I slid forward the Dorian draft. Lila reached for it. Iris put her hand over the document first. Theo said, the proposed transaction includes compensation to entities associated with Lila and Drew, payable upon closing. Drew sat back. That's not what it sounds like. Celeste, who attended in her capacity as co-trustee, spoke for the first time. It sounds like money paid to both of you if company assets are sold. Drew looked at Lila. She did not look back. It was a standard success arrangement, Lila said. Nothing had been finalized. Iris turned to her. Did you disclose the compensation arrangement to the board? Lila's expression did not change, but the silence did. I was waiting until the terms were mature enough to present. Did you disclose it before advocating for the transaction? No, because there was no binding transaction. Did you disclose that your brother's company would receive compensation? It was under discussion. Iris repeated the question, slower. Did you disclose it? Lila's voice sharpened. No. The words seemed to alter the room. Until then, board members could pretend we were watching a marriage collapse around a governance disagreement. After that answer, the issue became professional. I presented Drew's access records next. His internal credentials had been created before approval. The request described him as temporary operations support, but no board minutes reflected an appointment. His badge access included areas and systems beyond what his original service agreement required. Drew lifted both hands. I just handled what Lila asked me to handle. I'm not part of whatever marriage fight this is. I placed the payment summary in front of him, then explained the invoices. He looked down. Each payment sat just under the secondary approval threshold. The descriptions were vague. Several billed dates conflicted with known travel and access records. Drew gave a small laugh. You're auditing my calendar now? I'm asking what work the company paid for. I did a lot of things that weren't logged. Name 3. He looked at Lila again. She was staring at the table. The voicemail came last. I did not play it theatrically. Theo identified the preserved file, date, and time, then played the short relevant section. Lila's voice filled the conference room. Don't push him too hard until the vote is scheduled. When it ended, the hum of the lights seemed louder. Lila leaned forward. That is taken completely out of context. What was the context? Iris asked. I don't remember every private conversation with my brother. Drew spoke too quickly. We were talking about the anniversary dinner. I looked at him. The vote was scheduled 2 days later. He closed his mouth. Lila's control finally began to crack. She looked around the table and seemed to realize that no one was responding to her tone anymore. This is a divorce tantrum, she said. Reed cannot tolerate that I became more capable than he is. So he is dragging private pain into a business meeting. I kept my voice even. This stopped being about our marriage when you used it to hide a side deal. You always do this, she said. You act calm so everyone else looks unreasonable. No, I stayed calm because you were waiting for me to become your evidence. Her eyes filled with tears. I could not tell whether they were real. That realization hurt more than I expected. I spent years being treated like an accessory in your family, she said. Then you should have asked for respect, I replied. Not try to take the keys while I was still in the room. For the first time, she raised her voice. I earned my place here. Iris closed the packet. Earning influence does not eliminate disclosure obligations. Dorian pushed his chair back slightly. I think it would be appropriate to pause discussions until the internal issues are resolved. Theo looked at him. Preserve all communications related to the proposed transaction. Dorian's expression tightened. I am not agreeing that any misconduct occurred. No one asked you to. The independent directors called a brief recess. Lila tried to follow Iris into the hall, but Iris stopped at the door. You should remain here. Drew stood. Can I leave? Theo answered before anyone else. You may leave the room, but do not access company systems or remove company materials. I don't work for you. No, Theo said. That is one of the issues. Drew sat down again. During the recess, Lila turned toward me. You planned this. I documented what you planned. You let me walk into this room. You scheduled the meeting. Her voice dropped. You could have spoken to me. I tried for years. You turned every question into proof that I was weak. That's not fair. Neither was our anniversary dinner. She looked away. When the board members returned, Iris read the proposed actions into the record. Lila's signing authority and conditional voting proxy were suspended pending formal review. All activity related to Dorian's proposed purchase was paused. Drew's system access and badge were disabled immediately. His contracts and invoices were frozen for audit. The company would appoint independent counsel to review the altered packets, related party payments, access approvals, and disclosure failures. The board also confirmed that no transfer of family trust assets could proceed without trustee approval and the required supermajority. Lila would not participate in votes concerning her own conduct. Drew would not remain in the meeting. Dorian would receive a preservation notice and no further confidential material. Then Iris addressed me. Reed, this board is not making a finding about your marriage. It is finding that the information presented for today's meeting was incomplete and appears to have been materially altered. You will retain your position while the review proceeds, subject to the same oversight as everyone else. It was not a triumphant declaration. It was better. It was procedural, signed, and entered into the minutes. The vote passed. Lila abstained because she had no alternative. Drew's badge stopped working before he reached the elevator. He held it against the reader twice, then looked through the glass wall toward the conference room. No one moved to help him. Dorian left without finishing his coffee. Lila stayed seated. Her lipstick mark remained on the rim of a paper cup she had not touched in an hour. After the meeting, I went with my divorce attorney to review the filing Lila had submitted. She had requested temporary control over several joint accounts and described my company access as a risk to marital assets. Our attorney filed a response asking the court to preserve the status quo and prevent either of us from transferring, concealing, or encumbering marital and company-related assets outside normal operations. I did not try to use the company investigation to take everything from her. I did not cancel her credit cards, empty accounts, or change the locks. I followed the temporary orders. She stayed in the house while possession was addressed through counsel. I stayed in a furnished apartment arranged through a month-to-month lease. Celeste offered me her guest room, but after 2 nights on her couch and 3 lectures about my breakfast choices, we agreed distance would protect our sibling relationship. The investigation lasted months. It found that Lila had exceeded her administrative authority, failed to disclose conflicts, directed staff to treat Drew as an operations officer without formal approval, and participated in presenting different board materials to different recipients. The Dorian transaction had not closed, so the company did not lose the assets. That mattered. It also meant the legal consequences were less dramatic than some relatives expected. There were no police officers arriving at the house and no cinematic arrest. There were lawyers, interviews, preserved emails, audit bills, insurance notifications, and hours of people explaining why they had followed instructions without asking who had authority to give them. Drew's contracts were terminated. The audit questioned a substantial portion of his billing. He repaid part of it under a confidential settlement rather than fight through litigation. He insisted to anyone who would listen that he had been caught in the middle of a bad marriage. The access trail and invoices made that argument less persuasive. Dorian withdrew his proposal. His attorney sent a careful letter stating that he had relied on representations from people he believed had authority. Independent counsel did not accuse him of creating the scheme, but his communications became part of the review, and his firm was barred from receiving new company information for the foreseeable future. Iris remained painfully neutral throughout the process. At one point, a relative complained that she should publicly defend me. Iris replied, "My responsibility is to the company, not Reed's feelings." Oddly, I appreciated that. Celeste and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. She did not say, "I told you so," which for her required discipline. Instead, she said, "I'm not mad because she fooled you. I'm mad because you kept helping her do it." I know. No, you know now. I need you to remember later. I will. She looked skeptical. That sounded like something you'd say to end a meeting. It probably is. She smiled despite herself. Some family members believed I had handled everything correctly. Others thought I had been cold. One aunt told me, "You should have warned your wife before embarrassing her in front of the board." I reminded her that Lila had announced our divorce and my supposed removal in front of 20 people over dessert. My aunt sighed. She was angry. So was I. You didn't look angry. That sentence stayed with me. People often assume the person who remains calm is not hurting. The truth was that I had spent the entire board meeting aware of my ring against my finger. Every page I turned sounded too loud. Every time Lila spoke, part of me heard the woman who had stood beside me after my father died. Exposing the scheme did not erase the marriage that had existed before it. It only made returning to it impossible. About 3 weeks after the board meeting, Lila called me directly. Our attorneys had instructed us to communicate through counsel except for genuine emergencies. I almost let the call go to voicemail, but I answered because I thought something had happened at the house. "What's wrong?" I asked. She was quiet. "Nothing is wrong." "Then this should go through the attorneys. Reed, please." Her voice sounded different. Not polished. Tired. I waited. "I was under pressure," she said. "Drew kept telling me the company would never respect me unless I forced the issue. You approved the access." "I know." "You changed the packet." "I didn't personally edit every page. You directed it." She exhaled. "I wanted to be seen as more than someone's wife. You were. Not by your family. Celeste distrusted you. That is not the same as everyone dismissing you. You always chose them. I defended you so often I stopped checking whether they were right." She began to cry. This time, I believed the tears. That did not change the facts. "I did love you," she said. "I loved you too." Did? I looked around the apartment. There were still moving boxes against one wall. My anniversary suit hung over the back of a chair because I had not taken it to the cleaner. "You didn't ask to be seen," I said. "You tried to erase me. That's not what I wanted. It's what you did." She was silent. Then she asked, "Is there any way back from this?" "No." The answer came without anger. That was how I knew it was final. I told her future communication needed to go through the attorneys unless there was a real emergency. She said I had become cold. Maybe I had. Or maybe she was finally hearing a boundary without an apology attached to it. The divorce was not quick. Nothing involving shared assets, 8 years of marriage, and a company investigation is quick. But the company remained protected. The family trust assets stayed where they were. Governance rules were tightened. No spouse, sibling, or relative could receive internal access through an informal request anymore. Related party contracts required written disclosure even below the old payment thresholds. Packet changes were logged and distributed through a controlled system. I also gave up some authority. That surprised people. I supported adding another independent director and requiring a second trustee approval for certain actions I had previously been able to take alone. Protecting the company could not mean building rules that restrained everyone except me. My father's agreement saved us because he understood that trust was not a control system. It took me longer to understand that the same was true in a marriage. The last family meeting related to the investigation took place almost a year after the anniversary dinner. The final report was approved. The board closed the internal review, subject to ongoing compliance changes. Lila no longer held any voting proxy or board advisory role. Drew had no contracts or access. Dorian's proposal was formally marked inactive. Afterward, people lingered in small groups. Some avoided me because they had supported Lila early. Others tried too hard to say they had always suspected something. I did not punish either group. In the parking lot, Celeste asked whether I was okay. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt my wedding ring. I had stopped wearing it after the board meeting, but I carried it for months. Not because I wanted the marriage back. I think I kept it because putting it away felt like admitting that the good years had become evidence in a case against me. That day, I handed it to Celeste. "What am I supposed to do with this?" she asked. "Put it with Dad's documents for now." She stared at me. "That is an emotionally alarming storage system. I'll deal with it later." "No, you're going to deal with it eventually. That's different." She placed the ring in her pocket. Then we walked to our cars. I still think about the anniversary dinner sometimes. I think about the untouched cake, the place cards, Lila's lipstick on the wine glass, and the way everyone pretended not to hear private pain becoming public until the company was mentioned. I could have stopped her before she stood up. I could have confronted her as soon as I found the Dorian draft. I could have warned her that the agreement limited her authority and given her a chance to retreat quietly. Instead, I let her speak. I let her say, in front of witnesses, that she was acting both as my wife and as someone trying to take control of my family's company. Then I used her own records, her own altered packet, her own compensation agreement, and the clause she never bothered to read to stop her in front of the board she had assembled. The company survived. My marriage did not. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.